Of all the lights that ancient people watched crossing the night sky, one moved the slowest. A pale, steady, golden point that crept along so gradually it seemed almost to belong to the fixed stars, taking nearly 30 years to complete a single lap of the heavens, the farthest, faintest, most patient of the wanderers. This is the story of that slow light, the planet we call Saturn. And like Mars and Jupiter before it, it is a story about us, about a shape so strange that the greatest minds in history refused to believe their own eyes and spent centuries trying to explain it away, until the truth turned out to be more beautiful than any of them dared imagine. To the ancients, Saturn's defining feature was that slowness. It takes about 29.5 years to orbit the Sun, so slow that a person might see it return to the same spot in the sky only 2 or 3 times in a lifetime. It was the boundary of the known solar system, the last and slowest planet the naked eye could find. And that slowness shaped what people saw in it. The Greeks named it Cronus. Cronus, one of the eldest gods, the ancient titan of time and the harvest, father of the gods who came after. The Romans called him Saturn. This was the old god, the god of age, of cycles, of time itself, plodding around the sky at the pace of a generation. There's a dark thread in that myth worth holding on to, because Saturn's own story will echo it in a strange way. Cronus, the legend says, was warned that one of his children would overthrow him. So, to keep his throne, he devoured them, swallowing his own children one by one as they were born. The god of time, consuming what he created. Keep that image in mind. Because when humanity finally built instruments good enough to look at Saturn closely, the planet would appear to do something uncannily similar. It would seem to grow companions and then swallow them. And it would drive one of history's greatest astronomers to the edge of despair. For all of recorded history before the 1600s, though, Saturn was just that, a slow golden dot. No one could see that it was anything more. It had no visible shape, no features, no detail. It was the old, slow god at the edge of the sky, and it kept its greatest secret completely hidden. Until the telescope. We've met the telescope before in this series, in the hands of Galileo Galilei, who in 1610 turned it on Jupiter and found 4 moons that helped topple the Earth from the center of the universe. That same year, that same restless genius, with that same crude instrument, turned his telescope toward the slow, golden light of Saturn. And Saturn broke his understanding completely. Because Galileo's telescope, revolutionary as it was still weak, blurry, small, barely able to turn points of light into shapes. When he looked at Saturn, he did not see a ring. His instrument wasn't good enough for that. He saw something that made no sense at all. Saturn appeared to have grown 2 lumps, one on each side. Saturn was not a single round planet. It had ears. He didn't know what to make of it. The best he could figure was that Saturn was somehow a triple body, one large planet flanked by 2 smaller companions, sitting motionless on either side, never moving, never orbiting. It was bizarre and unlike anything else in the sky. And Galileo, being Galileo, did something very of his time to record it. He hid it in a code, to claim a discovery without revealing it, so he could keep studying while still proving he'd seen it first. Galileo scrambled his finding into an anagram, a jumble of letters he sent to colleagues. Unscrambled, it announced that he had seen Saturn as 3-bodied. He was certain of what he'd found. He was also completely wrong. And Saturn was about to humiliate him. Because a couple of years later, in 1612, Galileo looked at Saturn again, and the 2 companions were gone, vanished. The ears had simply disappeared, leaving Saturn a plain, round, lonely ball. The most careful observer of the age looked at the planet he thought he understood, and it had eaten its own companions. Galileo was stunned. He wrote, in genuine bewilderment, "I do not know what to say in a case so surprising, so unlooked for, and so novel." The man who had found the moons of Jupiter, mapped the craters of the moon, and helped move the Earth from the center of creation, was completely defeated by Saturn. And here is where the old myth comes eerily back. Saturn, named for Cronus, the god who devoured his own children, had appeared to grow 2 companions and then swallow them whole. Galileo himself reached for exactly that image, wondering, half in jest and half in despair, whether Saturn had devoured his own children, just as the ancient god had. Of course, Saturn hadn't eaten anything. What Galileo had witnessed without any way of understanding it was the first recorded example of a phenomenon we now call a ring plane crossing. And the explanation is gorgeous, but it needed a better telescope and a better mind for this particular puzzle than even Galileo could bring. Here's what was really happening. Saturn does have ears, but they are companions. They're a vast, flat ring encircling the planet. And Saturn is tilted, so as it slowly orbits the Sun over its 30-year year, we see that ring from constantly changing angles, sometimes wide open and obvious, sometimes closing to a narrow line. And every so often, Saturn's ring turns exactly edge-on to the Earth. The ring is so astonishingly thin, as we'd learn, only a fraction of a mile thick against a span of hundreds of thousands of miles, that when we see it perfectly edge-on, it very nearly disappears. It becomes a line too thin to see. That's what happened in 1612. The companions didn't vanish. The ring just turned sideways. But Galileo could never have known that. His telescope was simply too crude to ever resolve a thin, flat ring. He would go to his grave, blind, under house arrest for his defense of the sun-centered universe, never understanding what he had seen at Saturn. The old god had kept it secret from even him. Solving it would take nearly half a century, and a new generation, and better glass. The man who finally cracked it was a young Dutch genius named Cassini-Huygens, a mathematician, physicist, and astronomer who, crucially, knew how to build telescopes far better than Galileo's. Huygens and his brother ground their own lenses to a new level of quality and built long, slender telescopes with far more magnifying power and far sharper images than anything Galileo had used. In 1655, Huygens turned one of these superior instruments on Saturn, and the blur that had defeated Galileo began, at last, to come into focus. The first thing he found wasn't the ring. On the 25th of March, 1655, Huygens spotted a bright point of light near Saturn that moved with it, night after night, orbiting the planet. It was a moon, a large one, the first moon of Saturn ever discovered. We now call it Titan, and it will become the strangest and most important character in this entire story. But Titan was just the warm-up. As Huygens studied Saturn itself with his superior telescope, the ears that had baffled Galileo slowly resolved into their true form. They were not companions, they were not lumps, they were a single, continuous, flat ring, a disk encircling the entire planet, not touching it anywhere, suspended around Saturn like a halo. It was such a radical, unbelievable claim, a planet with a giant ring around it, a shape found nowhere else in the known universe, that Huygens did exactly what Galileo had done. He didn't announce it plainly. He hid it in an anagram, a scramble of Latin letters, to stake his claim while he gathered more proof before facing the ridicule he knew would come. 3 years later, confident, he revealed the solution. Unscrambled, the Latin read, "It is girdled by a thin, flat ring, nowhere touching, inclined to the ecliptic." In one elegant sentence, Huygens had solved the mystery that had tormented astronomers for half a century. Saturn wears a ring. He laid it all out in 1659 in a landmark book he titled Systema Saturnium, the system of Saturn. And notice what he'd also explained. If Saturn is tilted and wears a flat ring, then as it orbits, we must see that ring at changing angles, and sometimes edge on, when it would seem to vanish. Huygens' ring didn't just describe Saturn's shape, it explained Galileo's vanishing companions perfectly. The disappearance that had defeated the greatest astronomer of the previous age was solved in a single stroke. But solving the shape of the rings only opened a deeper question, one that would take another 2 centuries and a completely different kind of genius to answer. What are the rings actually made of? A ring around a planet is a bizarre object. Is it solid? A vast rigid hoop of some unknown material? Is it liquid? How can such a thing even exist without tearing itself apart? For 200 years, astronomers assumed the rings were solid or liquid hoops. But there was a problem lurking in the mathematics, a problem about whether such a ring could survive the immense, uneven pull of Saturn's gravity without shattering or collapsing. It was one of the great unsolved puzzles of physics, and in 1856, the University of Cambridge made it the subject of a prestigious prize. The prize drew the attention of a young Scottish physicist, one of the greatest who ever lived, though few knew it yet, named James Clerk Maxwell. Maxwell would go on to unify electricity, magnetism, and light into one of the most beautiful theories in all of science. But as a young man, he turned his formidable mathematical mind onto the rings of Saturn. Maxwell worked a problem purely with mathematics, no telescope required, and he proved something remarkable. A solid ring, he showed, could not survive. The gravitational stresses would inevitably tear it apart. A liquid ring would break into droplets and destroy itself too. There was only one possibility left that the equations would allow. The rings, Maxwell concluded, could not be solid or liquid at all. They had to be made of countless, separate, tiny pieces. An immense swarm of individual particles, each one a little moon in its own right, each orbiting Saturn on its own path, all together creating the illusion of a smooth, solid ring when seen from far away. The rings were not a hoop. They were a river of rubble. It was a stunning piece of reasoning, deducing the physical makeup of an object nearly 1 billion miles away using nothing but pen, paper, and the laws of motion. Maxwell's essay won the prize in the 1850s, and his conclusion stood for over a century as pure theory unconfirmed. He was right, of course, but no one could prove it directly until we could go there and look. And so the rings, across 2.5 centuries, had been read by 3 great minds in 3 stages. Galileo saw them and was baffled. Huygens saw them clearly and named their shape. Maxwell, who never needed to see them at all, deduced what they were made of. Each got closer. But the full, breathtaking reality of Saturn would have to wait for us to build machines that could leave the Earth. Before we go there, though, hold on to just how strange Saturn is as a world. It is a gas giant, the second largest planet, a vast ball of hydrogen and helium with no solid surface like Jupiter. But Saturn has a party trick no other planet can match. It is so light for its size, so low in density, that if you could find an ocean big enough, Saturn would float. The only planet in the solar system less dense than water. And those rings, the glory of Saturn, are as delicate as they are enormous. They stretch hundreds of thousands of kilometers across, from Saturn nearly to the distance of the Moon from Earth. And yet, in most places, they are only about 10 meters thick. 10 meters. If you shrank the rings to the width of a football field, they'd be far thinner than a sheet of paper. And they are made, we now know, mostly of water ice. Countless trillions of chunks of ice, from grains of dust to pieces the size of houses, each catching the sunlight, each on its own orbit, exactly as Maxwell predicted. The most beautiful structure in the solar system is, in essence, a colossal, glittering blizzard of ice, endlessly circling the old golden god. For centuries, that was as much as we could know, a floating giant wearing a blizzard of ice, watched from a billion miles away. But in the 20th century, humanity did what Galileo, Huygens, and Maxwell could only dream of. We built spacecraft, and we sent them across the solar system to Saturn to see the old god face to face. The first scout was Pioneer 11, which swept past Saturn in 1979, the first spacecraft ever to reach it, proving the journey could be made. Then, in 1980 and 1981, the two legendary Voyager spacecraft flew through the Saturn system and sent back images that took the world's breath away. For the first time, Saturn was not a smudge in the telescope. It was a place. The Voyagers revealed the rings in stunning detail. Not one ring, but thousands. Nested bands and gaps and waves, a structure of impossible intricacy. They confirmed Maxwell's swarm of particles, and they glimpsed Saturn's moons as real worlds. But the Voyagers were just passing through. To truly understand Saturn, we needed to stay. And so we built one of the greatest machines humanity has ever launched. Its name was Cassini, named for the astronomer who found the gap in the rings, and it carried a European-built probe named Huygens, after the man who saw their shape. Together, Cassini and Huygens would spend 13 years unveiling Saturn, and would rewrite everything we thought we knew about the old god and its family of moons. Cassini arrived at Saturn in 2004, slipping into orbit after a 7-year journey, and almost immediately, it began sending home images so beautiful they seemed impossible. Views of Saturn, its rings, and its moons that turned the old golden dot into one of the most stunning places human eyes have ever seen. Cassini gave us the most extraordinary portraits of Saturn ever made. In one, it flew into Saturn's shadow and looked back toward the hidden sun, and caught the rings lit from behind, glowing like a halo of fire, more delicate and luminous than anyone had ever seen. And in that image, if you look closely, there is a tiny blue dot in the darkness beyond the rings. That dot is the Earth. All of us. All of us. Pause on that. A robot built by human hands, a billion miles from home, turned around and photographed our entire world, every person who has ever lived, as a single pale blue speck beneath the glowing rings of Saturn. The old god of time, framing the whole of human history in one quiet dot. It is one of the most humbling images ever captured. Cassini mapped the rings as no one ever had, resolving them into thousands upon thousands of individual bands, revealing waves rippling through them, and strange dark features called spokes that appear and vanish with the Saturn seasons. Maxwell's swarm of ice seen at last in exquisite, intricate, endlessly surprising detail. And at Saturn's North Pole, Cassini found something that still stops people in their tracks. A giant, perfect hexagon. A six-sided jet stream, thousands of kilometers across, wide enough to fit several Earths, carved into the clouds with almost geometric precision, spinning around the pole. A shape you'd expect from a machine, not a planet. Nobody had predicted it, and we still don't fully understand it. But Cassini's greatest gifts were not Saturn itself. They were its moons. Because when Cassini turned its cameras on the family of worlds orbiting the old god, it found that they were not dead, cratered rocks. Some of them were among the most astonishing, most alive-seeming places in the entire solar system. And 2 of them changed the search for life forever. There was Mimas, a small icy moon dominated by one enormous crater that makes it look uncannily like the Death Star from Star Wars. There was Iapetus, a bizarre 2-faced moon, one hemisphere bright as snow and the other black as coal. Each moon was its own strange world, with its own mystery. But the 2 that mattered most were named Titan and Enceladus. Start with Titan, the giant moon Huygens had discovered back in 1655. From space, Titan is a frustrating sight, a featureless orange ball, wrapped in a thick, hazy golden atmosphere so opaque that no telescope, and not even Cassini's cameras, could see the surface below. Titan is the only moon in the solar system with a substantial atmosphere. and it hid its face completely. So the Cassini mission carried a passenger designed to solve exactly that, the Huygens probe. In January 2005, Huygens separated from Cassini, plunged into Titan's thick atmosphere, deployed parachutes, and spent 2.5 hours drifting down through the orange haze toward a surface no one had ever seen, sending back data the entire way. On the 14th of January 2005, the Huygens probe touched down on the surface of Titan. It was the first landing ever accomplished in the outer solar system, and to this day the most distant landing from Earth that humanity has ever made. And it sent back a photograph. This is it. The actual surface of Titan, a moon of Saturn, nearly 1 billion miles away. Look at it. Rounded, pebble-like stones scattered across a flat, dim orange plain under a hazy sky. It looks eerily like a dry riverbed on Earth. And that resemblance is not an accident, because those rounded stones were shaped by liquid, not water. On Titan, it is far too cold for that. Those stones were rounded, and that riverbed was carved by rivers and rain of liquid methane. Because this is Titan's astonishing secret. It is the only other world we know with a landscape shaped by flowing liquid, with rivers, rain, and great polar seas. But at nearly minus 180 degrees Celsius, the liquid isn't water. It's methane and ethane, natural gas, so cold it flows like water does on Earth. Titan has a complete weather cycle, with methane clouds, methane rain, and methane seas. There are lakes and seas near Titan's poles large enough to be called by the name Kraken Mare, the Gaia Mare, full of frigid liquid methane fed by methane rivers under an orange sky. It is the most Earth-like landscape we have found anywhere, run by utterly alien chemistry. And that chemistry is rich in the complex carbon-based molecules that, on Earth, are the building blocks of life. Titan is a natural laboratory for the chemistry that may have preceded life itself, a frozen echo of what the early Earth's chemistry might have looked like. We want to go back. A future NASA mission called Dragonfly will fly a nuclear-powered rotorcraft, a drone the size of a car, across Titan's surface, hopping from site to site through that thick air, studying whether the ingredients for life came together on this strange, cold moon. But if Titan is the solar system's most intriguing chemistry set, the other moon Cassini scrutinized may be something even more profound. It is small, only about 500 kilometers across, a bright icy speck you could drive across in a day. Its name is Enceladus, and it turned out to be hiding an entire ocean. Cassini noticed something strange near Enceladus' south pole, a set of deep, warm fractures nicknamed the Tiger Stripes. And then, flying past, it saw them, enormous jets of icy spray, geysers, erupting from those cracks and shooting hundreds of kilometers up into space, forming a plume that feeds one of Saturn's faint outer rings. A tiny frozen moon, spraying fountains of ice into space. Where was it all coming from? The answer was breathtaking. Beneath Enceladus' icy crust, kept liquid by the flexing tug of Saturn's gravity, lies a global ocean of liquid saltwater. And those geysers are that ocean, venting into space through cracks in the ice, a hidden sea, spraying samples of itself out into the open for anyone to catch. And Cassini did something no mission had ever done. It flew directly through those geyser plumes, flying through the spray of an alien ocean, and tasted them with its instruments. What it found electrified scientists. The plume contained salt, confirming a salty sea. It contained organic molecules, the carbon-based building blocks of life. And it contained hydrogen. That hydrogen was the clincher. On Earth, in the black depths of our own oceans, there are places where seawater meets hot rock. Hydrothermal vents. And the chemistry there produces hydrogen, which feeds entire ecosystems of life in the total darkness, with no sunlight at all. The hydrogen in Enceladus' plume is a strong sign that the same kind of chemistry, the same possible food source for life, is happening on the floor of its hidden ocean. Let that sink in. Around Saturn, the cold, distant, slow old god at the edge of the ancient world, orbits a tiny moon with a global saltwater ocean rich in organic molecules, with a possible energy source on its seafloor, spraying itself conveniently into space where a passing spacecraft can sample it. If you were designing a place to search for alien life, you could hardly do better than Enceladus. We have to be honest and careful here, just as we were with Mars and Europa. Cassini did not find life. It found that the conditions for life, liquid water, the right chemistry, and a possible energy source exist on Enceladus. Whether anything actually lives in that dark ocean is unknown, and answering it will take a future mission built to look. But the door, once again, is open. After 13 years, tens of thousands of images, and a complete transformation of our understanding of Saturn, Cassini was running low on fuel. And the team faced a dilemma born of its own success. Enceladus and Titan might harbor life. A dead, uncontrolled spacecraft could someday crash into one of them and contaminate it with hardy microbes from Earth. They could not allow that. so they chose a spectacular, deliberate ending. They called it the grand finale. In its last months, Cassini performed a series of daring dives through the narrow gap between Saturn and its rings, a place no spacecraft had ever flown, gathering its final, closest data. And then, on the 15th of September 2017, they sent Cassini on one last plunge directly into Saturn itself. Cassini fell into the atmosphere of the planet it had studied for 13 years, transmitting data until the very last second, until the friction tore it apart and it burned up as a brief meteor in Saturn's sky, becoming, in its final moment, a part of the planet itself. It died, protecting the moons it had discovered might hold life. It's hard not to find that ending genuinely moving. So look at the whole arc of it. Saturn began as the slowest, oldest god in the sky, Cronus, lord of time, who devoured his children. Its rings appeared and seemed to vanish, and broke Galileo. Huygens named their shape. Maxwell, with pure mathematics, deduced their nature. And Cassini, finally, showed us the reality, more beautiful, more intricate, and more full of possibility than any of them could have dreamed. The old god of time turned out to wear a blizzard of ice, as fine as paper, and wide as the sky. Its cold, distant family of moons turned out to hold methane seas and hidden oceans and, just possibly, the ingredients for life. The planet that baffled the greatest minds in history became, in the end, one of the most profound places in the search for our cosmic companions. And it repeats the lesson of this whole series. Ancient people looked at a slow golden light and read a god of time into it, and every time we got closer, with Galileo's telescope, with Huygens' sharper glass, with Maxwell's mathematics, with Cassini's cameras, the reality didn't shrink the myth. It shattered it, and replaced it with something far grander and stranger than any god the ancients imagined. There is a beautiful humility in that. For 400 years, Saturn has been humbling us, showing the greatest minds of every age that they had not yet understood, that there was always more, always stranger, always more wonderful than they had guessed. Galileo could not solve it, but he kept looking, and that, in the end, is the whole story of how we came to know the sky. So on the next clear night, look for it. The slow, pale, golden light, the farthest wanderer the naked eye can find. And if you have even a small telescope, point it at that light and you will see them, the rings of Saturn floating around the old god, plain and impossible and real. The same sight that defeated Galileo, that Huygens named, that Maxwell decoded. Yours to see in an evening. Thank you for watching. This was the third stop in the planets, the human story of how we came to know the worlds next door. We've met the Red War God, the King of the Giants, and the Lord of the Rings. Next, we turn to a world of blistering heat and crushing air, and to the people who dared to land on it. A planet named for love, that turned out to be a kind of hell. Until then, go outside, find the old god, and look for its rings.